So Oliver, you touched on a few things, based on your interest in the project, and over the course of the last year or 2 years, we've seen a pretty significant impact in the global dynamics of the market, and as it relates to the urea supply and pricing in Canada. We've seen things like the Paris Accord being launched with the global emissions. We've seen things like the war on Ukraine with Russia, and we know that they're a big supplier of fertilizers in the global markets and the various sanctions. You touched on a little bit about the logistics, but can you just give us or give our participants a little bit of a high level understanding of the dynamics and the impact of urea pricing on and supply in Canada?
Derek, could you do me a favor and bring up the slide, North American urea supply and demand dynamics? Oh, there you go. There it is.
Yeah.
Let me just get the, okay. Gentlemen, while I'm talking, or ladies and gentlemen, while I'm talking, I would appreciate if you could look at the slide. And I think the most important part of the slide is the right-hand side. In other words, you see imports of 4.9 million tons going up to 2028 to 7 million tons. In other words, not only an increase of 2.1 million tons, but let's say what's important is the deficit in North America of, let's say today, 5 million tons going up to 7 million tons. The first question that one has to ask oneself is, can the farmer afford fertilizers? Well, it depends on weather, it depends on yields, it depends on crop prices. In 2015 to 2020, your average corn prices were approximately, I'm talking US dollars here, $3.60 a bushel. 2021, last year, we saw an increase of fertilizer prices and also an increase of corn prices to $5 US dollars 70 per bushel. All of a sudden, we see a corn price of US dollars 760 to 770. And let's not forget what will happen to crop prices due to the disturbance of the Ukrainian crop output, which will happen because, I mean, the Ukraine supplies approximately 15 to 20% of the total, let's say, global crop output. Remember 2008? You farmers did cut fertilizer input. Why? Because fertilizer prices just went too high. Remember, you were paying well over $1,000 for phosphate, US dollars, well over $1,000 for potash, and close to $1,000 or over $1,000 for urea. And a lot of you basically cut potash and phosphate prices because you couldn't afford the input anymore. You weren't getting the crop prices that could basically afford those prices. So farm affordability of fertilizers is one issue. The second issue is how much urea will a farmer buy? Not only in Canada, but in North America. Well, this of course depends on the corn acreage allocated. We've seen the US has allocated corn acres normally between 87 and 92 million acres. We expect this to go up in the next 10 years to 100 million acres. Next question the farmer has to ask himself or herself, will industrial demand affect prices? Well, our governments are forcing us to be environmentally, let's say, more conscious. DEF is an issue, and we are being forced to use DEF in all diesel-powered vehicles, especially in trucks. So the usage of DEF will double by 2027, from 1 to 2 million tons per annum. Supply factors. The next issue is, has anybody read whether you're going to see any major expansion in the US or in North America over the next 10 years? I haven't seen it. Now, besides, let's say, tweaking or debottlenecking by Sea of Industries or by Coke or by OCI in North America, we have here and there a couple of 100,000 tons. You don't see any major urea plant being planned. Remember, urea plant takes up to 6 years from conception to start of production. In other words, to get financial close takes you approximately 24 months. To build the bloody thing will take anywhere between 42 and 48 months. I haven't seen anything firm on the books as yet. So you will continue having this 5 to 7 million ton deficit on the North American market. Next thing is, I think you all have noticed that Chinese exports have been affected. Why? Because of carbon emissions, because most plants in China are powered by coal, and coal are making, let's say, cities in China so polluted that people can't really live in these cities. And basically, what is urea? Urea is energy. In other words, energy transformed into a product. And the Chinese have got a deficit in energy, and therefore their, let's say, 5 to 6 million metric tons that they used to export will be dwindled down to zero, if not become a major importer. America has been importing 5 million metric tons. And as we see here from the graph, it will be increased to 7 million metric tons by the end of the 2020s. Should we ignore what is happening in the Ukraine and Russia, which account for 27% of world fertilizer production? An old teacher of mine in commodities reacted upon the question, why are the prices going up? And he answered, because one truck is missing in the supply system. So what's going to happen to fertilizer prices, let's say now, since Russia has invaded, let's say, the Ukraine? We've sanctioned, let's say, everybody in Russia. Industry in the Ukraine is going to come down, even though I believe this situation is transitory. But we will always have one or the other geopolitical problems. We will always have one or the other sanctions, one or the other import tariffs. And this is what farmers today have need to insulate themselves against. The next issue, what is going to affect prices is growth. The global urea market has a growth of just under 2% per annum. That means we need an additional 23 million metric tons to be added to global supply by 2028. Right, now we come to anti-dumping tariffs. Anybody remember the anti-dumping measures on urea from Eastern Europe and Russia and the Ukraine? I'm talking, let's say, 20 years back. Okay, well, let's talk about something which is nearer, let's say, to our time. Last year, the US Department of Trade put sanctions, or not sanctions, but import tariffs on Russian and Trinidadian UAN. What does that mean? That means producers of UAN in North America, UAN is approximately 50% urea, will enjoy additional profits because they will not be hampered by imports, cheaper imports coming from Trinidad or coming from Russia. Now, who is to say that you won't have sanctions in the future? Again, having your own fertilizer plant is going to de-risk that problem. Logistics. Maybe, Derek, if you could pick up the slide on Western Canada delivered versus FOB NOLA. Now, 60% of the 5 million tons today imported into North America comes into New Orleans. Now, of course, a lot of you are going to say, yeah, but we don't get all our urea from New Orleans. We get it from CF, we get it from Sesferca or from Yara, we get it from Coke, we get it from OCI, it's imported from just over the border. Yes, but the question is, what is the urea that you farmers are paying for? How is it priced? It's priced off New Orleans plus logistic costs and overheads and profit from New Orleans to Western Canada. And that, as you can see, the average is approximately between 130 and 160 Canadian dollars per metric ton. That's the average that's the average spread over the last 5-6 years. So again, who is earning the money here? Are you farmers earning the money? This extra logistic cost? No, this goes into the pocket of, let's say, of the producer who is, let's say, nearest to you. I would bet you that very little urea is actually physically arriving in Western Canada from New Orleans, but it is priced off New Orleans. And that is, as far as I'm concerned, that is a bit scary. Cost of production. Maybe, Derek, you could look at natural gas price advantage in Western Canada. There you go. The gas price is or makes up approximately 70% of the operational expenditure of every ton of urea. In other words, as you can see from the graph, you will have very little competition from German urea producers. But having a plant in Canada, where you see the Canadians have the absolute low, one of the lowest prices worldwide, and you can compare the urea prices in Western Canada to the prices that Saudi Aramco is giving to SABIC, or that the Omanis are giving to the Omani plants, or that Fertil gets from Ruwais gas, or what the Algerians, Sonatrach, is giving to OCI or to AOA. We're talking of prices of approximately $1.25 or $1.35 per MMBTU over the last 5 years. So going back, the gas price makes, let's say, 70% of the cost of urea. And having a plant in Canada will de-risk your OPEX to a large degree. Over to you, Derek.
Great, Oliver. I think that was thank you. Appreciate the summary on the market dynamics. You know, what I've taken away from it is there's no end in sight to this import gap in North America in particular. We'll continue to see these logistical costs being incorporated as part of the urea pricing that when it hits Western Canada. And the big one for me is, or the big two are, you know, the reduction of supply as a result of coal-based energy being used to produce urea, and as it relates to the carbon emission and protocols. And of course, the uncertainty around urea supply coming out of Russia over the course of the next little while, all playing a very critical role in why it makes sense to produce and build a facility in Western Canada. And of course, the last piece is just related to where we're at right here, which is on the natural gas pricing. Given the significant cost component that natural gas plays in the operating costs of a facility, and we sit in a pretty good market in Western Canada as it relates to supply and pricing, it only makes that added more sense for us to look at building this facility in Western Canada.